He is no stranger to the gaming world of Malaysia. With hands-on experience in one of the world's leading RPG franchises, to even designing his very own game. He's the man responsible for slotting in a representation of our country into a video game that's beloved by the world. Who are we talking about exactly in this edition of Kisah-kisah Gamers Malaysia? Well, it's not 3, it's not 2, but it's Wan Hazmer! And I'm gonna stop talking in this voice right now.
For those who are unfamiliar, Wan Hazmer is a Malaysian-born game designer. Not just any game designer, no. He was the lead game designer on one of the world's beloved RPG franchises, Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 15 to be exact. He was also game designer on Final Fantasy Type 0. How did he get to Japan? Why even? At a mere age of 16, Hazmer realized issues regarding storylines in games, which sparked his idea to pursue a career in the gaming industry. As a result of that, Hazmer enrolled in a computer programming course and graduated from Asia Pacific Institute of Information Technology in 2001. He then found himself in multiple careers, from advertising to being a university lecturer and even creating flash games, which by the way won first and third place in a competition. Wan Hazmer wore different hats post-education, but in September of 2008, he made a decision, one that would ultimately change his life.
I had to save money. I had to actually teach in some universities, and I actually submitted games, made flash games for contests, and won some money, and I saved it, and I went straight to Japan.
The reason why I went to Japan in the first place was I wanted to enter the game industry, but I know being a game designer means I need to know a certain level of Japanese, and at the time I couldn't speak Japanese at all. So I had to enroll myself in a Japanese language school. And the objective of me being in Japan, because I need to have a goal. So what I did was I created a game design proposal in English. And my goal is to translate the entire document into Japanese.
I think I saw somewhere that document is 10 pages long.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, it's called the Hero Network. It wasn't actually meant for Square Enix, but I guess Square Enix saw it and looked at it and thought, it fits our genre, right? So, it resonates with us. So yeah, actually that's what my senpai told me when I was in Square Enix, that the proposal was interesting.
Hazmer then found himself working at Square Enix in 2010, spending a couple years and honing his craft as a game designer for games like Final Fantasy Type 0, all the way to a lead designer role for Final Fantasy 15, which is where Hazmer started getting recognized back home due to his inclusion of Malaysian influence into the game, specifically in the city of Lestalem. While it's not fresh news that one can find roti, satay and Teh Tarik in the game, Hazmer has also mentioned previously that he tried to put in Pontianaks and Orang Minyaks into the game as well, but it got rejected. It's every game designer's dream to make their very own game. The same applies for Hazmer, as he made his way back to his home country and embarked on that quest.
I actually told my director at the time, Tabata-san, even 5 years before I left, and said, once I'm done with Final Fantasy 15, I will just I have to go back to Malaysia and start my own company, because number one, I'm very passionate about making my own games, of course. It's any game designer's dream, basically. And number two is also because I feel that Malaysia had a lot of talent, and yeah, because of that, I really just wanted to come back to Malaysia and see how we're gonna pull it off.
When Hazmer returned 2.5 years ago, he brought his newfound experience from the land of the rising sun back home along with him. With that, he established his own company, Metronomik, who are also the guys behind the recently released No Straight Roads, which we at CJM had a chance to play, of course, but with all the time spent in Japan and the experience garnered, there's so much that Hazmer has to offer back home.
I think what I've learned from Square Enix way of working is that they design games based on their instinct rather than documents. A lot of game developers they tend to put a lot of things in text first, and then they design it, and then only they test it. But in Japan, or should I say in Square Enix, they usually don't trust any documents that you write until you actually implement it in practice and you have the controller in your hands. Then only you know whether it's fun or not, So I think that's a very, very good idea because now games are like that, right? Everything can sound good on paper, but might be bad in the video game. So yeah, that's one thing. The other thing is this very specific to Final Fantasy 15, which I really like, and that is Final Fantasy 15 was quite a challenge to us as developers because we had to rethink how Final Fantasy was done, right? And increasing the relevance was very important to us. And relevance means that if the user has to be connected to the game emotionally, not just based on story, but based on the gameplay experience as well. And so we stuck with the concept of a road trip with your buddies, and everything is tied to that. That concept of emotional context of a game, not in terms of story and graphics only, but also in terms of gameplay. Yeah, it brought a huge impact to me on how I grow my team in Metronomik to make Straight Roads. And the other thing I like about Malaysians is, a lot of people might see this as a bad thing, but being passionate and yet relaxed is very important lah. Because in Japan, you're usually passionate and
not going home.
Like not going home. Which does result in really great products, but it does come at a cost, Yeah, and I think Malaysia provides all this groundwork for this kind of environment.
Safe to say, Hazmer is now back home with Metronomik set up and creating waves with its first offering. No Straight Roads has already won a couple of awards, including the 2019 Unreal Open Day Award for Best Indie Project. What started off as the inclusion of Roti Canai, Satay and Teh Tarik in a world-renowned franchise title has now led to an establishment of identity as an indirect introduction of Malaysia to the world of gaming. To conclude this edition of Kisah-kisah Gamers Malaysia, it must be said that Wan Hazmer has done Malaysia and all its gamers proud, and we can't wait to see what else Hazmer and Metronomik has in store for us in the future. With that, we leave you with one final message from Hazmer.
Yeah, for me, I think identity. I feel that one of the biggest mistakes that a Malaysian always falls into in terms of the trap is like, I want to make an Uncharted game but with Hang Tuah. Or can you imagine an MMORPG where everything is traditional Malaysian? That would be so cool, right? Yeah, it is a very good conversation starter, okay? But it cannot be your core idea. And the reason behind this is because, you just make a copy of something. So an Uncharted with Hang Tuah elements just tells me that Uncharted will definitely fare better than your game. You can start off saying that, but you have to really think what is special about Hang Tuah that cannot be done in Uncharted. There's so many aspects, but if you start the game idea and just continue with it like that, just saying I want Hang Tuah Uncharted but with Hang Tuah elements, or MMORPG but this or something but that, then it will never be successful because it will just be a copy. So, and you really, really have to find your identity, and it is full. It should encompass everything, not just a skin. The identity comes from within. You have to understand that identity is not only about being special, it's whether people think it's special or not, especially for video games, okay? Yes, I know be yourself is a very important philosophy, but show yourself is also another important philosophy. And you can show yourself through video games.